Hi guys, do let me know if you are able to hear me and see me. I think we are live now. Okay. So I think we are live now. Hi, good to see all of you guys who are joining in. Do drop in a hello so that I know that you guys have joined in and all. Okay. So good to see many people who have joined today. Today I think is the second day of the NMAT window as such. Since the NMAT paper taking window has started, you can you can take NMAT, you can then retake it, etc. So I want to know how many of you have already taken it, how many of you are planning to take it in the near future. I want to know all of that. So do drop in a hello and let me know how your NMAT preparation is going and when you plan to take the NMAT. I took the NMAT exam today morning, today afternoon actually, the afternoon slot as such. I got I went in with no strategy as such because I just went in without any expectations. And my strategy was that, okay, I have done a lot of CAT work, I'll be well prepared. I also had done NMAT specific work basically because of making the course, like looking at all the previous year's papers, looking at the questions that are asked. So I had some idea of the NMAT but because I had not taken any NMAT mocks as such, I did not have an NMAT specific strategy. So in this particular video, I'll be looking at what should be the ideal strategy for taking the NMAT exam, how should one go about doing it, and what you should keep in mind as such. So good to see all those who have joined us. Hi VK, hi Jaikishan, hi Saurabh, hi Rishi. Hi, okay, good to see that you're planning to take it on 2nd November. Go in with a lot of practice. Those who are joining us and those who do not know as such, we do have an NMAT course. We have NMAT mocks as well as NMAT course, and I know that based on what I took today in the NMAT exam, that whatever was asked concept-wise, the NMAT course is covering everything. So every type of question that was asked in the NMAT exam, we have covered completely in the NMAT course. So if you're looking for a course for covering everything that is there in the NMAT exam, please take a look at the Kraku's NMAT course. Secondly, please make sure that you take all 5 NMAT mocks before you actually go to the paper as such, because the strategy for NMAT is very different from the strategy for CAT. And that strategy you will have to evolve through actual hard work as such. So please do take all the 5 NMAT mocks before you go and attempt your actual NMAT. So hi Saurabh, hi everybody who is Vedant, hi Dharun, good to see all of you guys who are joining. How to deal with CR and RC. So I will get to each of these sections as such. Let's get started actually. So over here we have so I went in with very little minimum preparation as such, so I scored 292. The split was Quant, it was 88, verbal it was 99, and LR was 105. My ordering of sections was Quant first, LR next, and verbal last. The reason I think I did slightly poorly in Quant as compared to others is because I had no idea of how to index for time and attempt in the Quant section, because I was indexing according to CAT attempt. In CAT attempt, we take a lot of time to solve. You get the correct answer, it is +3. You get the wrong answer, it is -1. It makes a lot of difference because you have only limited questions to solve and you can take your time to solve them. This is very, very different. So what actually happened was that I started with the Quant section as such, and I think midway at about the halfway mark, 26 minutes or so, I realized I had done only 12 questions, and then I realized, oh my god, I have messed it up because I've done only 12 questions out of 36 as such, 1/3 questions in half the time. Then I realized I have to pick up the pace because clearly this will not happen. I cannot finish the paper, and I know that maybe finishing the paper might not be ideal as such, but I should at least see the questions that are there because there might be easier questions as such. And in this particular scenario, I felt that I was spending a lot of time in a lot of questions which are arithmetic questions as such. So you do not have a calculator and you are asked a lot of profit and loss questions, you are asked a lot of interest questions, and that takes a lot of time as such. Whenever there were questions based on algebra or they were based on functions or equations, polynomial equations, etc., you could solve them faster because there were concepts involved in it. Once you knew the concept, okay, quadratic equation, the quadratic equation has only unreal roots. Because it has only unreal roots, there will be no solution for this particular question. That is conceptual, you can get that in 1-2 minutes. But some of them, like for example, when you have simple interest, compound interest, and those numbers are also not easy numbers as such. So when you have questions like that, you start spending like 3-4 minutes to get to the answer. Then I realized that this strategy will not work for NMAT. This is not how you solve questions for NMAT, because in NMAT the options are never really close. So you have to essentially solve many of the arithmetic questions using the options. So what I mean by that is, when you have an interest question, okay, that difference between compound interest here and compound interest there, or compound interest here and simple interest there was equal to this much. What you should ideally do is, the options are generally in ascending order of value or something like that, and they are far apart, like 3000, 4000, 5000, 6000. Then start with the middle value, either 4 or 5000. See whether, because as the principal increases, the difference between the interest will also increase. So see whether at 4000 you are arriving at the number. At 5000, you can check roughly 4000 you are arriving at the number, then that is the answer. If the value that you are getting at 4000 is more than the option given, then it is lesser, and then you can get it to 3000 as such. If it is much more, it won't be even 5000, it is likely to be 6000 and so on. So using the options, you can find the answer much faster than trying to perfectly solve the questions. See, in CAT, you like try to dot all the I's and cross all the T's, do everything perfectly. I'll write the equations nicely, I'll find out the roots of the equation, all of that I'll do, because ultimately there are 22 questions and getting any question wrong will be penalized as such. That is not the case over here. There are 36 questions. You can, even if you go wrong, there is no negative marking. Even if you leave questions, there is no negative marking. But the incentive essentially is to answer fast and move on. You shouldn't spend too much time on the questions as such. So the first thing that I would tell you, the first mistake I made in this attempt was that I spent too much time. Don't solve it like the way you solve CAT question papers. You have to solve like the way you solve OMAT papers, NMAT papers. Maths, you have to be super fast in solving. Now, a lot of people will think that, okay, NMAT Quant will be much easier than CAT Quant, so I'll be able to go through them faster. But that was not the case actually. NMAT Quant was on par with CAT Quant. In most questions, I felt that this question can actually come in CAT Quant as such. So I'll answer a few questions and then move on. I did questions on pipes and cisterns come? No question on pipes and cisterns came actually, but there were questions on time, speed and distance, and there were questions on time and work, but nothing on pipes and cisterns specifically. So basically there were questions, a lot of arithmetic questions which were very calculation intensive, like a lot of profit and loss questions which were like this big. So reading, solving would take you 3 minutes, and you should not spend 3 minutes on solving a question. So that is the basic thing over here. You have to be like this very fast person who uses the options optimally to get to the answer. That will work well over in this particular exam. Okay, so this is the first thing that I realized for NMAT exam. You have to be very fast. Wherever you feel that I'm going to take at least 5 minutes to solve this particular question, just ditch the question, answer whatever you think is close enough and move on. The reason why I'm saying is that because it will not be worth it. There will be some questions you can solve in 2 minutes, there will be some questions that you can solve in 3 minutes, there will be some questions that you can solve in 5 minutes. The minute you get to a 5-minute question, just guess something and move on, because there will be at least 2 2-minute questions that you can solve in the same time as such. So in these kind of questions, you can either try to see that, okay, if I use the options, can I solve it? Otherwise, just guess and move on. Time management is super important over here. Okay. Just arithmetic questions is not enough for 99 percentile. This had a lot of arithmetic, a lot of algebra, lot of questions on like quadratic equations, linear equations, etc. So it was not just arithmetic as such, probability questions. So a lot of questions were there which were difficult. They weren't easy, and even arithmetic questions were essentially CAT level questions as such. Okay. So somebody is asked that I'm scoring around 200 and I want to increase it to 250. How to do that? So basically, what I would suggest is start practicing. Firstly, make sure that you take a lot of NMAT mocks, because time management would be very important. Secondly, start practicing solving. So I want you to solve a lot of questions from arithmetic, from algebra, from probability, from number systems, from everywhere as such, because it is extremely important to get that base done very well. Vedansh is asking, want to leave number system, any suggestions? I would say that don't leave number systems, because there were quite a few questions which are based on divisibility, which were basically data sufficiency combined with number systems. But like I found 2-3 questions like that which are data sufficiency based on number systems as such, divisibility and number systems. So in number systems, you should at least do divisibility, HCF, LCM. That is a basic thing that you should at least do from number systems. The rest you can maybe leave for later or keep it at a low priority as such. Dhananjay, if you are scoring 60 to 65 marks now in dashcards, what I would suggest is that keep working at it. See, the dashcards, if you are scoring that now, you still have a lot of time till actual CAT, because you have like 2 months till that. I want you to take dashcards every week, analyze each dashcard very well, and between dashcards you should work on building your work on the weaknesses, work on areas which you did not do well as such, because essentially the point of the dashcard is not to look at the score and then extrapolate, okay, if it is 90 to 95 percentile here, it will be 97 percentile, etc. The point is that 90 to 95 percentile, you have to go to 95 to 97 and so on. So the point is that whenever like you give one dashcard, and between that dashcard and the next dashcard, identify areas that you didn't do so well in this one, and then work on that so that you can improve it over the next dashcard as such. Those guys who have not started giving the mocks, CAT mocks as such, I would please request you, please start, because this is the time where you have to give mocks very regularly, very religiously, because it is the most important part of your preparation. Giving mocks, analyzing mocks, understanding weaknesses and working on them through study and practice is extremely important. That is essentially how you build, like take the jump from 90 to 95, from 95 to 97, 97 to 98 and so on. You will not be able to take that jump without taking dashcards and analyzing your weaknesses. Okay. You can find questions to solve in the I think you would not have the access to, you would have access to the NMAT course as such, you would have access to the mocks. I'm not sure whether you have access to study room over there, but I'll ask the team as such. There is a SNAP course, so Abhiraj is asking about this. So for SNAP also we have a course, so do check out SNAP crash course as such. But those who have essentially enrolled for NMAT, please make sure that you go through every single concept, because all of those small concepts are actually coming. So there were questions which were based on finding out how many pairs of numbers are, how many letters have the same number of numbers between them as they are in the like the alphabetical order as such. There are so many small concepts, and all of those concepts actually are coming in the LRDI section, the logical reasoning section. So I want you to go through the NMAT course religiously. Make sure you take a look at every single type of LR content that is there. And I'll tell you, okay, what was the most important part in Quant. I felt arithmetic was the biggest chunk. I would say about 60% was arithmetic. If I consider like profit and loss, there were a lot of profit and loss questions, lot of questions from averages and ratios, etc. There were a lot of questions from time, speed, distance. So I felt arithmetic was like at least 60%, if not more than 60-65% of the quant section as such. So it was super important to get right. There was a significant chunk of algebra in it. So there was questions on quadratic equations, question on functions, question on basically understanding the graphs, etc. If you understand the graph, you would understand why, how many solutions are there, etc. and all. So algebra also I felt was the second most important over here. I actually do not remember a single geometry question coming, because I can't remember even one geometry question that, I think there was some geometry questions that were asked, but I don't remember, like I don't think if it was there, maybe one or two questions would be there, but I don't remember seeing a geometry question here as such. There were questions on probability, there were questions from number systems, there were questions from sets, there were questions from Venn diagrams, but I don't think there was a single question that I remember from geometry as such. Maybe it was there, maybe I'm not remembering correctly, but I know that most of the questions that were there were arithmetic plus algebra. That I think would have been 90% of the section as such. Okay, so what do you, I would suggest the prime focus in your quant section should be speed. You should just focus on getting every question that you can in under 2 minutes. That would be the ideal way of looking at the particular section. Use the options as much as you can. Try to infer the answer using the options. So whenever you have to solve questions on interest, etc., instead of solving from the question to the options, use the options to try to figure out which of the options is closer to the value of interest that you're getting as such. Okay, so let's go to this. Any relation between NMAT 2023 and CAT 2023? CAT 2023 will help you with, if you're preparing for CAT 2023, it will help you definitely with the quant section. Quant section is mostly covered by the CAT preparation as such. The LR section is completely different, so you will not be covered by CAT preparation. The verbal section, again, there is RC in it. Again, there is critical reasoning is not there, but the critical reasoning that you generally go through in RC would help you to an extent. But verbal and LR sections are different. Quant section is roughly the same. It will, preparing for CAT will definitely help you with NMAT as such. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there was any, yeah, there was no geometry in NMAT. Okay. Is NMAT, how many questions from input output came? There were 2 sets from input output, and both of them were fairly difficult actually, because I realized that they were one of the input output set was okay. It was not very difficult because only one operation was happening per row as such, and over there also actually they had 2 types of input output. One was the traditional input output that we have, where you have the input is a string of numbers and words is given, and each step rearranges that string. That was one type of input output that set that came. That was also slightly difficult but not very difficult. There was another input output set which was only numbers, that this is the input, this is the step 1 output, this is the step 2 output, which I felt was less input output and more about number series, where you had to figure out what is the relation between the numbers as such, and that was a difficult set as such because that was an entire set. So because of that, if you get that one entire set, you will do very well. If you don't get that set, you will do poorly. So I feel that in LRDI, the biggest, like the logical reasoning, the biggest areas where you could actually score well in logical reasoning was in arrangement. There was one entire set about arrangement. You had to arrange across 2 rows like shops facing each other, etc. And that was basically, I think you would get 4 questions correct. Then there was input output, again 4 questions correct, and that was not very difficult. If you understood, okay, this is what is happening, you could easily follow the steps to get to the right answer. There was another input output question. Basically you had to infer how the numerical operand is moving. So what is the numerical operation that is taking place? Once you like figured out, okay, the first function you have to like take the digits, you have to square. So n is the number that is the input, then n minus 2 square is the second step 1. N minus 2 square plus n is step 2, etc., etc. So you have to find out what is the value in terms of n of each single output, and once you had that particular function, answering all questions became fairly easy. Then you also had questions which were so input output, and this I felt if I scored 105 in that, and I think the place where I did fairly well in logical reasoning was these 2 areas, apart from the like verbal reasoning part, which is basically finding like which conclusions are supported, which assumptions are implicit. So critical reasoning is super important here, as well as simple arrangement and all the specific parts of reasoning which are like input, output, etc. So I would suggest that from the crash course, make sure that you like go through every single part of logical reasoning that is not generally part of CAT. So all of those type of questions were like mostly they were like the pure logical reasoning part were essentially those kind of questions. So if you are doing that particular well, so there were questions on visual reasoning, etc. All of these questions take a lot of time, and if you are used to solving those questions, it will be a much easier attempt than if you are not at all used to solving questions on visual reasoning, not at all used to solving questions on like series, not at all used to solving questions on input, output, etc. The second part was critical reasoning. There was quite a bit of critical reasoning, and what I felt in the critical reasoning was that there was one clear answer, and the clear answer essentially was not like essentially the author had one clear idea of what is the right answer, and the other answers were clearly wrong as such. Basically, if I say that which of these options is implicit, so you should think not verbally, not the way you would actually use critical reasoning in reading comprehension, but the way you would use critical reasoning in say arrangement. So if I say that it rains whenever the temperatures rise above 25 degrees and the humidity rises above 90%, it always rains. So basically it is like that. So if this is a statement given, then you can infer that if it is raining, can you say that the temperature rose above 25 degrees? No. What you can say is that if these two conditions are met, this condition occurs. But if this condition occurs, we can't say that these two conditions are met, because there could be another set of conditions which also lead to rain as such. So there were these kind of critical reasoning questions that were asked. Mostly logical and less like verbal reasoning as such. There was a lot of logical reasoning based in the form of critical reasoning as such, which can be concluded, which can be what inferences can be made. So they were mostly just logical inferences, which of these assumptions is implicit. So when you are considering which assumption is implicit, you have to consider it from a logical sense that if this assumption is not true, the option is incorrect. It's not a reasonable assumption to make. It's basically the least assumption that you need to make for the argument to stand as such. So those were quite a bit as such. There were two sets of input output. So I think there were 8 questions as such, 2 into 3 or 2 into 4 as such. Yeah. So as I mentioned in LRDI, what to do in LRDI? In LRDI, I would say focus on arrangement, focus on input output, focus on critical reasoning. These 3 things, if you do fairly well, you will clear LRDI. If you do not do these 3 things well, it will be difficult in LRDI. Okay, LRDI, it's not DI only, it's LR only, because the data interpretation part is actually put in quant section as such, and that also is one of the areas where, see, in data interpretation, you get actual data tables that you have to make. One more thing that before I forget, these guys are giving only 2 sheets of paper, and the invigilator for some reason said that we will not give the 3rd sheet of paper, only under exceptional conditions we'll give the 3rd sheet of paper or something like that. And I didn't want to argue, so while you are actually using your sheets of paper, you have to be a bit judicious, because you have to make sure that you finish quant in one paper, front and back, and LR and verbal will not take much space, but quant try to make sure that you do not waste a lot of space, because there will be 2 DI sets, you will have to do 2 DI sets, so if you take up a lot of space for DI etc., you might not be having enough space for solving a lot of questions as such. So be judicious in the use of the papers that are given to you. Okay, how is VRC different in CAT and NMAT, can you please tell? Okay, let's come to the verbal part. In verbal, there were 2 RCs. The RCs were, I would say, so I expected RCs that were easier than what actually came. The RCs that actually came in NMAT were slightly wordier and difficult to read. There was a mix of subjective and objective questions. So objective questions meaning that something is directly given. So it was given that visual art, so visual art can be divided into architecture and art in public spaces. And the question was directly given. So which of these 2 areas can visual art be divided into? And the answer was art in public spaces and architecture. So these kind of direct questions are also there in RCs, but a lot of subjective questions are there also. So you have to think it is not trivial RC. There will be like a mix of trivial and non-trivial RC questions as such. So definitely there will be some sitters in RCs. There will be some tough questions in RCs. RCs I feel is the area where you can score well. Verbal I felt totally, if I consider all of verbal, that is the least challenging. Quant is the most challenging. LRDI was second less challenging, but it is different, and because it is different, you do not have a lot of like practice of it. Verbal I felt was easier to do because it was not very time consuming. So there were a lot of questions which were basically fill in the blanks. So you could actually go through the fill in the blanks questions quite quickly. There were a lot of synonyms, antonyms kind of questions. Basically that you should have the same relationship between the 2 terms and the terms in the option. So either the relationship was of synonyms or the relationship was of antonyms as such. There would be, or it would be class and element of class, or example and action, like feeling and action kind of relation. But the relationship between the elements given in the question was fairly obvious, and you had to use that to actually find out the right option. So I felt all the vocabulary questions were fairly doable. They were not very difficult. The vocabulary words also were not very difficult as such. I felt particularly that some of the options had difficult words and all, but they were guessable. So for example, I didn't know what the word profanation meant, but I know that profanation would probably be related to profane, and heresy and profanation would be in some way that in some way I can understand what these words are in the context that they are appearing. So I didn't feel the vocabulary questions were difficult at all. You are not used to vocabulary questions in CAT, but they were very doable in NMAT. Like questions where you have to spot the error, essentially grammar and sentence correction questions. A lot of it was tense related, so like consistency of tenses. A lot of questions were based on consistency of like pronouns, antecedents. Essentially common grammar mistakes were essentially made, and I felt that was it was not very difficult to do. So basically from the perspective of time, vocabulary questions are great because you will be done in 30 seconds. Grammar questions are also great because you will be done in 30 seconds. The RC questions are not great because reading the RC, answering questions will take you a lot of time, and you don't have that much time to do all of that in the verbal section also. So in terms of where would you actually score a lot of marks, you would score a lot of marks in the verbal part, in the vocabulary part, in the grammar part, and RC essentially at times might not be worth the investment in terms of like the time required as such. Over here, one more thing that I would like to point out in RCs, I generally tell everybody to do active reading. Make sure that you write down the main point of every paragraph, write down the main point, etc. Like, don't bother for NMAT. There is definitely no time for all of that. So just quickly go through the RC, go through the paragraphs quickly and try to answer the question. There will be one-off question which maybe you can't answer correctly because you didn't read through. But there are so many sitters that absolutely do not require you to get like a very good understanding of the passage. There are many objective questions that do not require that kind of level of effort of writing down the main point. So skip the whole active reading part for NMAT. It is definitely not needed. Okay. 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 So somebody is asking. I don't know, Vedansh. You can take a look at the. I'm not sure of this as such. Like for your profile evaluation, I would like to say that try to see how the profile was viewed from your batchmates, from your peers. You can then get an idea of what are the required percentiles for those kind of profiles. Okay. Is mensuration important for NMAT? No, it is not. And there was no question from geometry in that. Okay. Data interpretation, two sets were there, and mostly it was like basically percentage increase, percentage decrease, profitability. So I felt that in terms of return on time invested, data interpretation was the best return on time invested, because in like 5 minutes I could finish the table, and because after I finished the table I can answer like 4 questions at a go. It was definitely worth it as such. So I felt that this was like a very good investment of time. Do the data interpretation well. It is definitely worth the marks that come with it. The worst investment of like time versus marks I felt was the interest question, because there is not even a calculator, and the numbers they were giving were not like so it was not like 12,100 or anything like that where you can easily divide and find out that like the principal has to be 10,000. Nothing like that. They will be like odd numbers and you have to divide by 1.08 raised to 4, etc. So I thought this makes no sense. This is going to take so much time. But essentially in such kind of cases, they expect you to essentially guess the answer or like approximate the answer. And because I was not doing that, I wasted a lot of time. So they expect you to approximate answers in interest questions, but do the questions on DI properly, because that is super important. Was VA more vocabulary based? No, it was a mixture of vocabulary, grammar, reading comprehension, and it was a mix of all of these things as such. It was not heavy on vocabulary, but vocabulary was very scoring because you could quickly go through those questions as such. Where to study and practice SNAP reasoning questions. So do study from our SNAP crash course. We have a SNAP crash course where we have covered the entire syllabus. Each concept comes with a concept test. So you'd understand all the syllabus, and you can also take attempt the different questions that are there and make sure that you have like a full experience of it. We also have SNAP mocks, so do take a look at them also. Okay, sorry Harshal, your sound, if the sound is not clear, I'm sorry, but just let me know if the sound is clear now. Ruwan, I don't know how much 226 in NMAT will get you, but I know that I think 230, 235 is generally what people say would be good. So maybe I'm not really sure, because this is based on last year's trends. This year's trends are just starting to come out because the window just started yesterday. So I'm not sure where that what that would fetch you, though I feel it is a decent enough score. 226 is decent enough as far as what I have heard is concerned. 69 and quad 236 overall will I cover. So 69 was the cutoff last year, so you are right at the cutoff as such. So that is the basic this. I think 236 overall is fine, but 69 is slightly on the edge, and I think that is where the uncertainty comes in. Safe score for VA this year, I would say 75. Safe, to be very safe, I think 75 should be safe. The cutoff last year was 69. I think quant this year is definitely harder than what I was expecting based on what was there last year as such. But I feel that I don't know whether the score will necessarily shift below 69 based on the fact that it was harder. How many modern maths questions were there? So there were no logarithms questions, but there were like functions questions were there, like graphs function questions were there, algebra questions were there. So not modern maths in the terms of there was nothing from logarithms as such. No logarithm questions were there. Yeah. I don't know whether you should retake the exam. If you're looking only for NMIMS, it would not be worth it. But I'm not really sure of whether it would be worth for like TAPME and other attempts. So, but I think the score that you mentioned was not that 236 overall. I feel is fine. You don't need to take it again. I think anyway they like if you're 236, you're kind of looking at NMIMS, right? And I don't know whether they accept the retaken score anyway. So I don't know whether you are, I think, just on the edge of NMIMS, and I think 69 might be enough given that quant seemed tougher this year. So I would like be hopeful, be optimistic as such. I can't really say anything about the exam window as such, but yeah, it felt scaled down also to me. I felt that like I didn't feel that I got only that many questions correct, but I feel that that might have been the case for a lot of people. So I can't really comment. A lot of people do very well in quant in general, so I might have gotten scaled down if I didn't do as well. So I'm not really sure whether they were scaling them down or not. Okay, how to prepare for the English and the LR part. So Tarushi, I would say that make sure that you take all 5 NMAT mocks firstly and foremost, because the strategy for NMAT, you have to basically base it based on like the mocks as such. For LR, make sure that you take a look at every single type of LR types that we have covered in the crash course. So make sure that you see the questions which are based on input-output. Simple arrangement questions will come. Questions based on critical reasoning. All of these are super important, and it is very important that you have a lot of practice also of that. Probability and PNC do come. Basically, questions about the number of configurations, counting, and like combinations came. Definitely, the probability questions also came. So I would say that I think 3-4 questions were based on that. Words per RC, this was on the longish side, so I would say it was actually 600 words in that RC. I felt the RC took me a lot more time to read than I generally take in CAT. So CAT RCs are 450 to 500 words. This was definitely over 550 words as such. Probability and PNC questions. One request to all of those who have joined us. So please, all those who are watching this stream, please like the stream. It helps us reach a lot of students, and it also helps and motivates us to have more of these sessions. So please like the stream, and retaken scores are not considered. I have heard that they are not considered by NMIMS, but I'm not, the others do consider the retaken scores also, but I have heard that NMIMS does not consider the retaken scores. So if you are considering only for NMIMS, it might not be worth it. Okay. Yeah, the sectional cutoffs are also important. The QA cutoff is right on the edge, but it is like last year it was exactly 69. This year, if I'm actually thinking it might be a bit lower given the fact that it is slightly on the tougher side. So I would not say that the things are difficult as such. Okay. How many words per RC? The RCs were on the longer side. I felt they were 600 words. That is the impression I had because I didn't actually count, but I felt that it took me like 4-5 minutes to actually go through the entire RC. It had like many small paragraphs, so there were 8-9 small paragraphs, and I felt it was on the longer side as such. Okay. Yeah, there were not one question, there were like 3-4 questions. I felt there were 4 questions per RC, but there were some sitters. So what I would suggest is this is on the longer side, and the time that is going to be given to you to solve the RC is very short. So do not do active reading. Do not listen to the advice that I give for CAT and implement it here. Here, do not do active reading. I actually skimmed through the passage. You don't need to like understand everything about the passage because you have to essentially skim through the passage. This skim through the passage, go to the options, because even when the questions are not direct questions, the options you can definitely easily narrow down the correct answer to 2 options. Then you can guess one of the 2 options. If you're wrong, you will get no negative marks. If you're right, you get 3 marks. Then you can get to the sitter questions. So of the 4, there'll be like maybe 2 questions where you are slightly like confused between 2 options, but then there will be 2 complete sitters based on direct information in the passage, and then you can score marks over there. So I would suggest don't spend a lot of time fussing over the RCs, because RCs do the easy questions correctly, that is enough. But reading the RC, analyzing the RC, thinking and writing down the main point and summary is just like not worth it at all. Okay. So I feel the LR attempt cutoff might be higher this time, but I can't really say because it's just been 2 days of this as such. So let us see based on the scores that are coming, and once we get a better idea of the scores, then we can see. So I will be ending my stream with this particular this. I hope I have been able to help you. So I will just summarize TLDR version based on my attempt. Make sure that you are very mindful of time. I made the mistake of trying to solve perfectly in the quant section. Be very, very mindful of the time in the quant section. In the quant section, you should basically just try to guess or arrive at near enough the answer as such. Okay, don't try to be perfect with the answers, arrive at near enough the answer. There is no negative marking. So your ideal attempt or ideal strategy should be trying to answer as many questions as possible, and as accurately, close to like 80% accuracy as possible as such. Okay. The second thing that I will say is make sure you go through all the different types of LR logical reasoning that we have in the NMAT crash course. We have covered every single thing that was asked in the LR section. So make sure that you see all the different types of LR questions before you go, because these are very, very different from what you see in CAT. The third thing, do not spend a lot of time on RCs, forget active reading, skim through the passage, that is enough. You will do, you can do very, very well based on the questions that come in vocabulary and from the questions that come in grammar as such. Those are better use of your time than reading comprehension. If you struggle with vocabulary or grammar, that is different, but reading comprehension in time wise, it doesn't make much sense. Vocabulary, the same amount of time you can solve so many more vocabulary questions than reading comprehension questions. So make sure that you go through the NMAT course. Make sure you cover every single concept that is given there. Make sure you do all the 5 NMAT mocks that are given there, and practice and solve every single question that is there in the NMAT, because it matters, your speed matters quite a bit in this particular type of exam. So with that, I will be signing off. Thank you guys. Thank you all those who have joined us today. Thank you.